101.
Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good, ladies and gentlemen? We back with another transmission. And today I'm going to be breaking down the eradication process of the Roman occupational government that coincides with the patrilineal system of democracy. But in order to understand this process, you have to understand how life and science both cohabitate together, because it creates this dynamic of the socio-political aspect of civics. Because in order to understand life, you have to understand the cycles that basically govern your life, which is connected to the Kali Yuga cycle, as you have the fall of everything in the three-dimensional state. So we finna get straight to it. Put all the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. We finna get straight to it. We finna get straight to it, ladies and gentlemen, because we at the close of the age. And the close of the age is where you have the cosmic pendulum comes back around. What goes around comes around, because that's operated by way of the law of reciprocity. Energy expands and returns to itself in the name of karma. So put those rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. So we finna get this going. All right, so now we're at the close of the age, ladies and gentlemen. So everything that you see and taking place, Dr. York was right. Dr. York was right. He was on point when it comes to when he was breaking down the Leviathan, the 666, and the whole thing that basically coincides with that energy. Hold on for a second. Because I'm still new to this StreamYard stuff. Make sure. Well, it's not showing. Let me. All right, hold on. Let me know if you guys can see the presentation. All right. Hold on for a second. Let me remove that. All right. So everything that you see taking place right now, let me know if you guys can see the presentation on the screen for a second. Make sure everything is working in synergy. Dang, it's not even letting me pull up my presentation. Hold on for a second. Bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Let me get this thing going. So you want to share the screen. Oh, wow. All right, here we go. I think this is it should pull up now. All right. Everything that Dr. York was basically talking about when he was talking about the Leviathan 666, everything is based on the whole collapse of the three-dimensional state, because we're breaking out of the Kali Yuga cycle. We're breaking out of the Kali Yuga cycle, which basically coincides with time, because time in itself is an artificial construct, because it's basically in between time and nature. So we breaking out of the Kali Yuga cycle, and we coming out of the Para cycle in the Treta age, and now we're going into the Satya Yuga. And the Satya Yuga is basically the accumulation process of the Golden Age, where you have truth and divine order and virtue, which is basically the process of spiritual enlightenment. So anytime that you see a infinity loop, the infinity loop is basically cultivated by time, because time is a representation of chronos, which is basically time, which is also a form of chronology, to where you're no longer stuck in a fixed position reality. So when you get into the Hopi prophecies, because Hopi prophecy and also biblical context, they both basically go hand in hand. So the Hopi predict that this world will face series of challenges, including environmental crises and social unrest and general loss of spiritual values. And then the prophecies of let me see. I don't think it's supposed to go there. Yeah, and then the prophecies also speak of specific signs and events that will occur before the arrival of a new era, referred to as the fifth world. The fifth world is actually the personification of the fifth dimension, which is known as the magnetosphere, which is the mental plane. This is the main reason why they want Greenland, because Greenland is actually the crown chakra of planet Earth. Because when you get into the esoterics of Three Eye Atlas, is also talking about the K1 Atlas. K1 Atlas is also connected to Kether, and Kether is also known as the crown. That is basically a metaphysical codex talking about the crown chakra of planet Earth, which is Greenland. So this is why all the tech gurus, they want to build an artificial grid system in that geographical landmass to basically siphon the consciousness that's coming from the fifth dimension, which is the mental plane. They trying to siphon that energy because technology and nanotechnology in itself is what locks down DNA. They're trying to create this artificial dynamic of another light code lockdown, because we're no longer stuck in the fixed position of reality of the Pleiadian light lock. In the Pleiadian light lock in itself, when you go to Job chapter 38, verse 31, it speaks about the Pleiadian light lock, because we're going through a new heaven and a new earth. So you're looking at a transition of power. So the prophecies, some of the signs include a deterioration of the earth's natural systems and the loss of traditional knowledge, conflicts, wars, discretion in sacred sites, and the emergence of false leaders, right? And we're going to get into the symbolism, because it basically goes hand in hand with the script that's being played when you're talking about the NFL. Now, let me blow this up for a second. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the prophecies speak of the world out of balance, because I told you guys before that the moon in itself is basically a quantum satellite, and it basically messed up the human circulatory system. And the human circulatory system is basically your chakra system. So if you out of balance, the whole universe is out of balance. And if the whole universe is out of balance, the whole civilization is out of balance. And it's basically collaborated with the microcosm or the microcosm of everything that's basically out of balance. So balance in itself is can only be cultivated by way of truth that is extreming down from the heart chakra. Because when you go into neurocardiology, the heart and the mind works together, because the heart is is about 100,000 times more highly magnetic than the brain. So that's how you get into getting the planet right back into balance. It's also a form of mind science technology, because the moon is the reason why the planet's been on red alert for the last 6 to 12,000 years is because of that motherfucking moon. The moon is what messed up everything it threw everything out of balance. There's a book that there's an anime series that you got to watch. It's called The Law of the Sun. It doesn't speak about the energy of the moon. It talks about how the moon is basically a Death Star, and it basically is siphoning the energy to keep you stuck in a fixed position of reality, to keep you stuck in time. So the Hopi prophecies speak of a world out of balance, where the sacred harmony between humans and nature has been disrupted. They warn of environmental crises, social turmoil, and the erosion of spiritual values. Yet, amidst of dire predictions of glimmer, hope shines through. The prophecies also foretell a arrival of a new era. We're in the fifth dimension. We're going back into the galactic center. So when you're going back into the galactic center, this is where truth is basically the apex of the civilization, because we're basically in the Aquarian age. The Aquarian age, where you see the sigil of it, it's a man holding a pitcher of water, and he's pouring cosmic energy. Those are neutrinos. Those neutrinos basically resurrect the carbon body, because carbon is the building block of all civilization, and ushering in a new time of unity, spiritual awakening, and restoration. Restoration embedded within the prophecies, and prophecies are specific signs like the cracks in the mother's Earth's delicate fabric, wars, conflicts, and scar nations, and the rise of false leaders who deceive the masses. The signs severe as wake-up calls, urging us to reevaluate our choices and strive for the world where harmony, respect, and balance prevail. Now, also, when you get into this, when you get into the esoterics of the Hopi prophecy. Now, you got to understand that the year 2026 is basically the personification of the Great Purification Period. I've been talking about the Great Purification Period. The Great Purification Period is where you have the synthetic energies have to go out the window. You can't bring synthetic energy into the fifth dimension because it can only be cultivated by the sun cycle. The lunar doctrine is what created the whole corporate apparatus, is what basically created the fraudulent system. So we're no longer under the energy of the moon. That's why you still see the moon out when it's broad daylight, because the planet is going back into its original balance due to the neutrinos that's coming in from the magnetosphere. So not far behind the twins, which is the blue star Kachina and the red star Kachina, red house, blue house, Scottish Rite, York Rite, Crip and Blood, whatever you want to call it. It's basically the same energies from a microcosmic aspect and in the macrocosmic aspect. Will come the purifier, the red star Kachina, who will bring the day of purification. We're in that time period right now. And on this day of Earth, her creatures and all life as we know it will change forever. The appearance of the twins begins a period of 7 years. So that was the window period from 2020 to 2027. That is what you get. Your personification of the 7-year tribulation period. So the 7-year tribulation period we're going through because 2027 is the fall of the Vatican Church, and I already did a whole transmission talking about that. So this 7-year period is where you have the chakra system of the planet and the chakra system of your human circulatory system is going right and back into balance, because I keep telling you guys, the pole shift starts with you first. The poles can't shift until you awaken in consciousness. That's why I keep telling people, this is why they want Greenland so much, because it's a representation of Kether. Kether is also known as the crown chakra of planet Earth. That's what Greenland is. It's the crown chakra of Turtle Island. So the appearance of the twins of a 7-year period, which will be our final opportunity to change your ways. You better change your motherfucking ways. You better stop the smoking. You better stop all that drinking. You better stop all that partying. So this is the time where you should get armed and you should get your knowledge up. You get in the weight room. You have to take this time period right now so serious. You got to be so serious about your evolution during this time period, because all these energies that's coming in is going to combat the synthetic energy that was controlled by the moon for the last 6 to 12,000 years. Many will appear have lost their souls in the final days, because there's a lot of people around who ain't got no motherfucker. So there's a lot of people who are NPCs who are basically known as loopers. Loopers are basically people who go through the same shit over and over. They're stuck in the orbit of dysfunction. So intense that nature of the changes will be that those who are weak in spiritual awareness will go insane. But the main reason why people is going to go insane is because they have an emotional connection to people, places, and possessions, which basically cultivates the three-dimensional apparatus. So this is why you have to get your emotions in balance with logic. You have to be very balanced during this transitional period, or else you're going to lose your mind. You're going to lose your mind because you're going to be like, man, I need my house, I need my car. You have a veneration and a credence for everything, as far as like the church, the school, all that shit is fake. Everything that they created in this three-dimensional system is fake. And this is why when you go through that 7-year tribulation period, this is where these old systems cannot, reap the benefits of, the fifth dimensional energies that's coming in. So many will go insane. For we are nothing without spirit. Life will be so bad in the cities that many will choose to leave this plane. Some will go in groups, right? So for Earth, we shall find relief from the madness, right? So like I said, our rebirth is basically their destruction. So so when you're talking about the close of the age is the end of their world, right? It's the end of the Canaanite. It's the end of the Canaanite that basically created this whole dynamic, and they're getting this, they made covenants and pacts with archonic forces to keep you in a subjugated state. So hold on for a second. Let me get down to the rest of the presentation. Now remember, I was telling you guys, everything is a script, right? Everything is a script. You got to understand something. So when you're looking at the Super Bowl, you got the Seahawks, you got the Broncos, you got the Rams, and you got the Patriots. The Seahawks is basically the personification of seers. Seers that's able to see beyond the veil. because that's where truth becomes the seat of judgment. And then you got the Broncos, is basically the personification of the white horse, or I guess you could say the red fire horse, right? Which is basically the fall of the empire system that's connected to patriotism and nationalism, where they create this dynamic of a new world order. And then you got the ram, which is a representation of the Christ energy, which is also a form of sacrifice. So there's going to be a lot of sacrifices as we transition, because they're going to try to siphon the energy. There's going to be a lot of sacrifices in between the times of the end of March as we going through April. There's going to be a big sacrifice somewhere, with celebrities or whatever. So you have to be very careful with your energy. That's why I said you cannot have an emotional connection to people, places, and possessions, because they're going to use the sacrificial energy in order to keep you in a fixed position reality. Now you got to also, Aries is basically working in conjunction with Neptune right now. So the ram in itself is also the personification of the ramming, or the eradication process of the illusions. And then you got, so this is also a transition, because the Bronco is also a representation of the fire horse in 2026. And then in 2027 is when you go to the year of the goat, or the ram, which is basically the same thing. So what you're seeing and taking place right now is a script. This is a prophetic script that's taking place in real time. So even when you go here, the white horse. Hold on. You got the white horse. The rider is often interpreted as either the Antichrist, who appears as the false Messiah. Like I was telling you guys about the Hopi prophecy, it basically extrapolated that evidence. Who appears as the false Messiah, offering a false peace? Donald Trump, Bibi Netanyahu, all these world leaders giving you the illusion of progressiveness because they want to build some motherfucking smart cities, or the symbol of the victorious spread of gospel. Depending on the theological perspective, the rider has a bow, a weapon, and a crown, victory, and goes forth conquering to conquer. Then, like I said, the year 2027, you cannot make this up. This is a script that they basically following. You cannot make none of this shit up. So 2027 is the year of the goat, or I guess you could say the year of the ram. But everything is signs and symbols. They putting it right in front of your face, right? Because the Patriots, they represent the fall of the old order. They represent the old paradigm shift. They're basically a representation of the fall of the Roman occupational government, right? So now, this is why I said you got to be careful of your energy. There's going to be a lot of sacrifices as we segue from, going into March and going into April. So take care of your energy during this time period. Take care of your motherfucking energy. So, and then when you look at this, the United States freezes all visa processing for 75 countries, including Somalia, Russia, and Iran. Now, Donald Trump, he is basically playing both sides, and I'm going to prove it to you in a video as we get through the transmission. Now, I spoke about this book before. Hold on. I spoke about this book before. It's called Moors and Dogma in the Ancient, Accepted, and the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and it's written by Albert Pike. Now, he talks about how the Western world is going to be going against the Islamic State, which is connected to Iran. So don't be surprised if you have a so-called, cyber attack, which is basically a form of radiological conventional EMP warfare, to where they shut down the grid system and have you living in a form of scarcity. So this is why you got to read this book right here called The Green Book. The Green Book by Muammar Gaddafi. And the Green Book is basically talking about the collapse of the democratic system and how to rebuild it. So during this time period, you got to get this book, because as you have the fall of the old systems, this book is going to teach you how to rebuild everything. And Baba Rod Hayes, he the one that put me onto this book. So everybody put this book in your chart, and also put my book in, what I'm saying? Because as we get through this process, my book also talks about the destruction process of democracy. And this is how you rebuild when you have the fall of democracy. So it's called The Green Book. You can get it on Amazon. And the link to my book is also in the chat. Now you have Iran's currency has collapsed. One Iranian rial is now worth $0, right? So, like I said, this is basically a part of the whole the tariffs and everything with Donald Trump, because they're basically trying to create some type of civil unrest, and they're trying to create this whole blueprint of the new world order. It's a part of the script. So these is basically the early signs of the four nemesis. Hold on. Because they're trying to create the new world order. So, like I said, civil unrest, civil war, border closures. Because when you at the close of the age, you got to close the motherfucking borders, right? They also talk about the closing of the borders also in this book. So you have famine in America because, like I said, you got the eradication of the grid system. If the grid goes down, that's when you're going to have to, savage your resources. There's going to be a lot of people who are not going to be able to, stand on 10 toes because, like I said, they've been playing this whole time. So it tells you right here, denunciation against oppression of Israel, which is your so-called blacks that's connected to Turtle Island. And then for the sword, which is war, misery drawn near them, and a nation shall rise up and fight against. Nation with swords, weapons in their hands, shall be conflict and turmoil. And then you got the fall of politicians and military leaders, which is the false messiah. And I know I got some Christians in here. You got to be very pragmatic when you understand what's taking place on the planet right now, because when it comes to biblical context, y'all all believe this concept of an antichrist, right? So there's a lot of Christians who also have a veneration and a credence for politics at the same time. But you got to understand something. Your so-called antichrist is not a motherfucker who's working at Pizza Huts, at Subway, Walmart. They're not working at a distribution factory. It's going to be somebody who has political influence. So that's why I keep telling people, if you're so stuck in the politics and the religion, they both go hand in hand, because the church and the state is not separate. So that means that you have to divorce from those ideologies in itself. Otherwise, you're going to fall when the system falls. So I got a video to show you guys for a second. So, all right. So we're going to pull up Donald Trump.
Time to disarm, and we'll see how that works out. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be in charge of that from our side. But if they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay for them. And we don't want that. We're not looking for that. But they have to disarm within a fairly short period of time.
What was also extremely interesting about this meeting between these two leaders was the pressure that they are indicating they're going to put on Iran. Now, of course, there's a lot of protests and unrest in Iran at the moment. The currency has crashed. It's an interesting time for Trump to signal that that they will go back in and they will destroy those weapons and missiles if they become aware of them. So this was an incredibly strong meeting with a lot of rhetoric that we come to know from both of these men. But particularly at this time of the year, I think really interesting that they are not letting up on any of this messaging in this region.
We have new details out of the Middle East tonight. Iran's leader taking aim at President Trump, saying he is guilty for the casualties and damage left behind.
Now, I know you guys remember when back in 2020, when the American government, they basically infiltrated Iran and they unalived Qasem Soleimani, and they was putting all those phrases out, such and such to America, the eradication process to America, and how there's going to be dark days for America. Now, I'm not, I'm not time stamping this, but it could be some type of, psychological operation that can take place on the 250th anniversary of, of America's birthday or whatever, and on July the 4th. And when you look at the Economist magazine, they also show you a lot of red balloons, because I was telling you guys, a red balloon is a time stamp, it's a timekeeper. Because a red balloon is a signification. It's basically a clock without no numbers. That's what a red balloon basically symbolizes. So when you look at the Economist magazine and you see the 250th anniversary, that is a clock with no numbers. It's a clock talking about the process of how they're going to start this New World Order system and how they're going to start World War III. And it can also be amplified either through Russia, Iran, or China, because as I was telling you guys before, their strategic allies with Venezuela, right? But I'm gonna keep playing the video. And this also coincides with the movie Leave the World Behind, because remember they had those red papers falling out the sky, and it was basically saying such and such to America. Basically, you know, they're gonna come attack us. Even that's also connected to the movie Red Dawn as well.
In the capital city, he claims Trump slandered the nation and encouraged the protests. President Trump, though, pushing back on those allegations, calling for an end to the current regime's rule. The president previously threatened to take action against Iran's government if it did not stop killing civilians. On Friday, he praised it for sparing protesters.
Did Arab and Israeli officials convince you to not strike Iran?
Nobody convinced me. I convinced myself. You had yesterday scheduled over 800 hangings. They didn't hang anyone. They canceled the hangings.
The president failed to provide a source to back up the claim that 800
Then, mind you, I'm gonna scroll back a little bit.
Become
Now it says Trump praises Netanyahu in peace talks. I keep telling y'all, he is playing both sides. How you gonna drain the motherfucking swamp and you in bed with the people who created the Balfour Declaration of 1918 to steal the land, right? When you're talking about the Rothschilds, right? That's why I keep telling y'all, he is the first Zionist president that we ever had on paper. So that's why I said he is playing both sides, York right, Scottish right. He's giving you the illusion of progressiveness while bringing in the New World Order at the same time. That's why I keep telling people there's a lot of people in the spiritual community, they have a credence for, you know, Donald Trump, especially the ones, you know, some of the Canaanites that give veneration and credence to Donald Trump. So that's why I said he's in bed with those people. He is playing both sides. He is the 45th president and the 47th president, which is the 9/11, which is a war strategy, a military strategy to bring in the New World Order system. Now we're going to get back to the presentation at hand. So I just had to reiterate that concept for you guys. So like I said, he is setting the stage. He's setting the stage for it. He is setting the stage for asymmetrical biochemical warfare. He is setting the stage for World War III. He's doing all these things. Hold on, let me get my screen share back going. Okay. Put the rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. Put those rice bowls in the chat. All right. So, and it tells you right here, you know, we're going through that process. Everything is written in divine order. So the 7-year Passover, east wind, famine, Genesis chapter 41, verse 27. And the 7 thin, ill, favored kind that came up after them are the 7s. So this is basically talking about, you know, civil war, the war with the fallen angels, the magnetic pole shift, the Red Star Kachina, which is the Great Purification period in World War, like I was telling you guys, because the scarcity of food and water and money and shelter can only be cultivated with the orchestration process when you have the collapse of the grid system. That can only happen, right? That's why you got to get your motherfucking resources in order. You got to get armed and you got to get your knowledge up. So the money will fail and will be, the money will fail, be destroyed, Genesis chapter 47:15, and the money failed in the land of Egypt, which is actually America, in the land of DC, Zidon, American, Canaan, which is the Canaanite. It's for those who don't understand who are Canaanites. Canaanites are basically the Ashkenazi Jews. Those are the ones that was basically cursed with leprosy, and I'm going to show you the symbolism that basically coincides with that prophecy. So all the Egyptians, which is basically the Americans, came onto Joseph, said, give us bread for we should die in the presence for the money. And then when you go to the seal proportion, the esoterics of it, this is the destruction of the United States of America in real time, which is the seed of the beast in the latter days. So this process takes place as we transition from 2025 to 2026. So then this is basically the fall of the European Union that is connected to Esau, which is a form of the United States economic system. So, and shall this affect greatly of the economy of the beast throughout the world. And once the economy of earth have failed miserably, once the waters of the great rivers of Euphrates have dried up, so that they no longer give life to the great city of Babylon. Because Babylon, when you break down the word from an esoteric point of view, Babylon is actually Babylon because it's connected to the United Kingdom, which basically controls the economic system. Then shall be then shall the world be prepared for the second coming of the Lord, which is the Christ energy that's coming in, that's connected to the magnetosphere. The Christ energy is the spirit of Melchizedek. The spirit of Melchizedek is Thoth. This is why they want to steal your thoughts. Your thoughts is Thoth because your thoughts leave an energetic imprint on the universe. This is why they want to create Neuralink. The Neuralink has the ability to siphon the brain waves that's coming from the mental plane, the magnetosphere. Because I keep telling you guys, God is the mind. God is the highest extension of the mind, which uses elements of matter to express yourself. So when you're able to express yourself mentally, that's how you create your own world by way of the law of attraction. And the people of the world shall be prepared to receive the word of God, right? Which is basically, truth. Dang, I thought this was blown up already. Now, Revelation, the esoterics of Revelation 16:10, and the fifth angel poured out his vial upon the seat of the beast, which is basically when you pour, that's basically the cosmic energy coming down. The cosmic energy that combats the energy of the beast. And for those who don't know, understand the dynamics of the beast is actually the Canaanite, because the Canaanite is a kind of a man. It's mankind, because there's a delineation between man and mankind. They're not the same thing. So the beast and his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gone their tongues for pain. And then when you go to the silver portion, I already read this part. I don't know why this is on there. I must have made a mistake. And the United States, the most wicked nation on the planet, right? Because it created, many different afflictions, and it created the whole corporate apparatus that basically feeds off your vitality, and it feeds off of who you are as a sovereign entity on this planet. Hold on. Then all your sins are recorded each day against you. So this is why I get into the esoterics of the Bible, because I keep telling you guys, the Bible is a Freemasonic playbook. This is a script that they're basically playing out. So you go to the simple portion, the final testament of so-called Jesus Christ, chapter 32. And the rebellious shall be pierced with the much sorrow for their iniquities shall be spoken upon the housetops, and their secret acts shall be revealed. And this voice of the warning shall be unto the people by mouths of my disciples, whom I've chosen in these last days, shall go forth and shall stay them, for the Lord have commanded them, which is the spirit of Melchizedek, which is Thoth. Melchizedek, Thoth is basically you, right? Only if you're basically in balance. You got to be in balance in order to reap the benefits of the energies. Now we're going to get into the esoterics of the symbolism when you're talking about the Denver airport, because a lot of people don't understand, the process of this. Because I showed you the Denver Broncos is basically collaborated with this whole esoteric mural that's basically taking place. And I'm going to show you a video that coincides with everything that I'm talking about. Now, when you look at the bottom right here, you see a leopard, right? The leopard is basically the fall of the Canaanite. Mind you, this is why I put my thumbnail the way it is. So like I said, Dr. York was right. He was tapped into a certain energy to where he was able to extrapolate the prophetic divination and what's going to be taking place in the future. So the ones that was cursed with leprosy is basically the leopard, which is the Ashkenazi Jew, the Canaanite. Now, go back to it. So the fall of the old system is connected to the fall of the Canaanite, which is this is why you see the leopard. So this is where you see the resurrection. You see the phoenix. You see the phoenix rising from the ashes. That's basically a representation of the indigenous people. We're rising as you have the fall of the Canaanite. So because we're basically at the close of the age. We're at the close of the age. So I'm gonna show you this video for a second. All right.
These days, that almost anything can become the topic of conspiracy theories, and that includes one of America's major airports. Opened in 1995, Denver International has long been the subject of wild speculation. Well, when the airport began a major renovation project, they decided it was a chance to play along. Barry Peterson has that story.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet. Washington, London, Paris.
If the saucers ever do come, may we suggest another landing zone, Denver's airport, where some say the welcome signs are already up for gargoyles. And are they really making a new home for the lizard people as workers remodel the main terminal?
Listen, they putting it right in your motherfucking face. They not playing. That's like I said. It's only cultivated by the threefold law. They got to give you the truth in the form of entertainment. They got to give you the truth in the form of media. They put it all in your face every time. But it's up to you to have the mental and the spiritual fortitude to see beyond the bullshit.
And why is this guy, well, this thing, shushing us?
It's all out of focus and weird.
Well, one may say these are the type of visitors that we have underground in our facility.
1995, America's fifth busiest airport has swirled with conspiracy theories. How the runways make a swastika. How the blue Mustang statue earned the nickname Blucifer after it fell over and killed the artist. And then the murals. Some show peaceful times, some show apocalypse.
I need you to understand that this video was on the news not too long ago. So that's not a coincidence that they got the Denver Broncos basically getting a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And don't be surprised if they win.
If art is in the eye of the beholder, conspiracy investigative journalist Jay Weidner beholds doom.
City underwater, flaming forests. This is scary stuff.
It's telling people in the know what this airport is all about.
Yeah, it's talking about the fall of your race. Or I wouldn't say your race, with a fall of your demographic that was propagating wickedness. That's what that mirror basically extrapolates. The fall of the Canaanite, right? The fall of the sixth ether gene. Because like I said, when you have the phoenix rising from the ashes, that is basically the resurrection process, the rebirth of those that's connected to the mycelium network of Turtle Island. This is why they want to see, you see the turtle right here at the bottom, right? You can't make this up. It's all in your face every time. Symbolism is going to be their downfall, but you got to understand the signs of the symbols, right?
This theory says baggage handlers share basement space with a secret underground railroad to bunkers in the Rocky Mountains, where top government officials will survive nuclear war.
I heard that it's maglev. The whole thing is
Magnetic levitation.
Magnetic levitation.
Just like Kirk, a little older, a little wiser, a little weirder. Well, as you know, Denver International has some strong conspiracy theories. So to make the airport experience a little more fun and keep with the theme for those traveling through DIA, the airport embraced the weirdness. A talking gargoyle dropped by to give travelers his 2 cents and got plenty of laughs.
Now I need y'all to look at this for a second. I think this is real. You know what I'm saying? I think this is actually a real entity, or they using some type of archonic intelligence that's able to control a gargoyle, because a gargoyle is also a personification of a draconian reptilian. This is why when you look at some of the great majority of the cathedrals in big cities, they always got gargoyles, because the gargoyles or the reptilians are the gatekeepers of the false information that's coming from the churches.
That's a little too close for comfort, lady.
Oh, damn.
What, you never seen a talking gargoyle before? Welcome to Illuminati headquarters. I mean, Denver International Airport.
This is awesome.
Hello? Do I know you?
Are you hungry?
Oh, I'm starving. You got anything for me? Those flowers look delicious.
Oh, my God.
Oh, it's because of the conspiracy.
Oh, it's because of the conspiracy. Look at me. I'm a little know-it-all. Will you get back over here? I got a question about this conspiracy. You know, you can actually put the phone down and have a conversation with me. But no, I'm a millennial. I've got to post it. I've got to snap face it and Twitter book it.
You're such a sweet talker.
Will you take me back home with you?
Let's go. I have some space in my backpack.
Actually, I think you have too much baggage for me.
there too, huh, guys? Now, DIA says the Gargoyle is a frequent flyer, racking up those miles. What, you think Southwest, Frontier Card, one of the two? And the Gargoyle will be at the airport again soon, so they tell us to tell you, the passengers, keep an eye out in the future. You never know when you might see him.
I can only imagine, say someone came out here for the cannabis tourism and going back home to the airport.
Like, Denver's weird, man. They got.
See, they putting it right in your face, ladies and gentlemen, because what did the Hopi prophecy in my last transmission with Ryan Hayes? They said you're going to see strange beasts coming from the caverns of the earth, right? Just like in the movie Cabin in the Woods, right? When you had the puppeteers at the bottom and they had all these entities stuck in these cages and all they had to do was push a button and they was coming to the surface of the planet and they was feeding on humanity, which is basically the Smorgasbord event. And they also talk about that in the Holy Quran, right? So I'm gonna we're gonna get back to the transmission. Hold on. It's okay. Put those rice bowls in the chat, ladies and gentlemen, because we finna cook their ass up. We cooking them up with the esoterics. We cooking them. Now, you got this going on. Trump warns Netanyahu vows to stop West Bank annexation. Now, that is the reason why the White House turned gold. The White House turned gold because it's basically talking about a transition of wealth, a transition of power. And they also talk about that in the movie Richie Rich. Thank God I watched a lot of movies when I was, younger, because me and Rod, we talked about this the other night, and he was also surprised. They talk about the annexation of different countries and how they're going to steal the wealth and create, digital ID systems and all that other stuff. That's what this movie was basically entailing. So if you will, watch this movie again. You got to watch this movie. And, from my opinion, who's to say that Richie Rich, Macaulay Culkin was probably, bearing Trump in this movie. So like I said, symbolism is going to be their downfall because it talks about the annexation process as you have the transition of wealth in the fall of the banking system. And then you got Bill Gates warns the world going backwards and gives 5-year deadline before we enter a new dark age, because their dark age is actually a synthetic golden age, right? You cannot stop the frequency of the planet. It's only going to get hotter on the planet, right? When the frequency rises, that's what they're talking about, climate change. That's what they're basically talking about. So this is why you got to be prepared for asymmetrical biochemical warfare. People warned to stay indoors as the air fills with toxins linked to heart attacks. Now, remember I was telling you guys about the movie, the new Jurassic Park movie, where they was talking about how there was humanity was collapsing due to a heart disease. That's why I said you got to be energetically centered in order to reap the benefits of these energies coming in. That's why I said it's basically the process of the great purification period. If your heart ain't right, you know what I'm saying, you ain't going to be able to get to the next level. Your heart got to be energetically centered. You got to be energetically balanced. You have to be aligned. You have to be aligned in order to reap the benefits of these energies. Otherwise, during the great purification period, you're going to fall when the system falls. So this is a lot of the fog and all this other stuff that's coming in, radiation. And that radiation is nothing but smart dust particles, which is also connected to the MQ-9 NO Reaper drone technology. And that technology in itself is what locks down your DNA, smart dust particles. Because like I said, they're trying to siphon your energy. You don't just have neurons in your brain, you got neurons all over your body. They're trying to siphon the information from your body and upload it into a neuromorphic cyber cloud. You have to understand that. So let me see. So yes. Then you got the hidden earthquakes, reveal doomsday glacier threat, major cities. Like I said, because there's a storm coming. I think there's a movie that came out. I forgot the name of the movie. I think it's called Flood or something. It was on Netflix. And it was the basis of the movie is how there was a glacier that basically got hit with a bomb or something like that, and it was nuked or whatever, and that's what basically caused a great majority of the flooding all over the planet. So they putting everything in your face. I told you, the perception of art imitates reality. The CIA has an office in Hollywood, and Hollywood has an office in the CIA. And then you got the Marvel movie coming out, the Doomsday. And then you got, the Avengers Doomsday is coming out. And then you got the Doomsday plane lands in Los Angeles after not being seen in 51 years, right? There's an algorithm at play. You got to understand the algorithm. So I think I got some more videos for you guys. Because I'll be getting too far into the transmission sometimes. Okay. Yes.
The progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up.
So this is why they, like I said, they doing all this doomsday stuff. They putting it out in, out in the ethers. They doing it for a reason, because we're at the close of the age. They are panicking right now. This is why they trying to push the New World Order so hard. They doing that shit on purpose. You got to understand that. So they got the Prime Minister, Kerry, says Canada's partnership with China sets us up for the New World Order system. I'm gonna play the video.
Well, the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the New World Order.
Davos, we know there's the big housing speech. What else can we anticipate?
There's also going to be some look at the new world order that President Trump is creating. And, a lot of countries that were, whining about tariffs 6 months ago and saying that President Trump was going to harm their economies had pretty good years. And I think it's in part because people recognize that President Trump has made it so that we are the shining city on the hill again. We are the engine of global economic growth because the U.S. is really that strong again.
At its core, final word, Europe was born as a project of peace. And Canada, over the years, over the decades, has served alongside European allies in pursuit of that peace. It's that, in those circumstances, from Vimy to Juno, that the world came to know the value of our strength. But now we're working alongside the European Union to combat climate change, to achieve the sustainable.
See, like I said, climate change is really just a raising of the frequency of the planet. It's only going to get hotter. This is why, we're in solar cycle 25. We're at the close of the age. The close of the age is the end of the Piscean age of darkness. The Piscean age is the fall of their economic system, the fall of the church, the fall of the political system. It's the fall of everything that was basically created by the Canaanite, because you cannot bring democratic energy into the fifth dimension, because democratic energy was cultivated by fraud. You can't bring fraudulent ass energy into the organic ethers. You cannot do it. Because they're not going to be able to coexist. You can't have a democracy in a sun cycle. That's like breaking universal law.
Sustainable development goals, and to protect, amongst other things, academic and scientific freedoms. In these ways, the world knows the strength of our values. And this partnership, which is in defense and security and economics, really builds those strengths in both our jurisdictions and lives up to our values.
Yesterday when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was
I got another video to show you guys that coincides, because they've been telling you about their plans the whole time. And I got an old video.
The Bush administration's.
I got the old video. This is an old video that came out like in the early 2000s. And they was talking about everything that's going on right now. They put it in your face every time.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States.
I feel like 2026 is even more of a big year in foreign affairs.
No question, because the United States is undoing its own global order and is in the midst of what we call a political revolution.
It is happening. I think it's not a matter of whether we're going to take de facto control of Greenland. It's how and when. The leaders of both Greenland and Denmark traveling all the way to the White House to meet with Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio today. And as expected, their leaders are digging in their heels.
We had what I will describe as a frank but also constructive discussion. We also agreed to disagree. And therefore we will, however, continue to talk. The big difference is whether that must lead to a situation where U.S. acquire Greenland, and that is absolutely not necessary.
The Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America sounds benign, hardly like a policy that critics call NAFTA on steroids. It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people. Political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
Yet it was agreed to by Mexico's President Fox, Canada's Prime Minister Martin, and President Bush in 2005. Administration officials counter their critics by saying everything about SPP is on the White House website. And they say the partnership is not a treaty, but more of an outline of priorities between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Still, some wonder why there haven't been public discussions about the goals being pursued.
Mind you, I keep telling y'all, this came out in the early 2000s. This is some old shit talking about the plans. I keep telling y'all, the Bible is a Freemasonic playbook. They got to give you the truth in the form of media and entertainment. They put it in your face every time, but people just don't. They choose to see what they want to see.
This SPP includes, for instance, a committee that is sitting down to harmonize our meat inspection and food safety. So how far away from a trade agreement can your dining room table and what you feed your kids be?
Other parts of the agreement mention border security as an issue, which include all of North America. In fact, the name of the agreement is not Security and Prosperity of the United States, but of North America.
When we elect officials, we expect them to act on our behalf. When we get involved in cooperative frameworks with other countries for joint regulation of fisheries or rail transportation or the skies, we're basically sharing our sovereignty with that government and outsourcing some of what we give our elected officials.
As disturbing as some find SPP, there is legislation in the House introduced by Florida's Katherine Harris that closely resembles the goals of the partnership. Included in that bill is a section which calls for the securing of Mexico's southern border by the United States and Canada. Lou, that's not the border with the United States, that's the border they share with Belize and Guatemala.
The idea that the White House would respond that this is on their website, this involves intricate workings amongst the Commerce Department of this country and Canada and Mexico's, of course. A regional prosperity and security program. This is absolute ignorance. And the fact that we reported this, we should point out, when it was signed. But as we watch this thing progress, these working groups are continuing, they're intensifying. What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I hope, I pray that I'm right when I said yes. But this is beyond belief. Bill Tucker, thank you very much. It brings us to the subject of our poll tonight. You and me vote. Yes or no? Please cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll have the results here later in the broadcast. Coming up, a measure to raise wages.
So if you're Putin, I think you feel like this is a time of maximum vulnerability for the transatlantic alliance, maximum vulnerability for the frontline European states. And what you learned from Venezuela, yes, you lost access to an erstwhile ally that you couldn't support in the Western Hemisphere, just as you did when Bashar Assad was toppled, just as you did when the Americans engaged and supported Israel in a 12-day war in Iran. But the much bigger statement is what the Americans are right now saying about Greenland. That feels very strategically attractive for the Russians. They've never heard such good news from U.S. on the foreign policy side since Putin has become president.
But what happens with Greenland? Again, this would be the end of NATO if something militarily were to happen. And is this really part of the Dunroe Doctrine, or is this just trying to negotiate like a real estater and see what happens?
It is part of the Dunroe Doctrine. If it was just a matter of security, basing agreements, listening posts for intelligence, heck, give Elon Musk a station to launch Starlink, all of that is negotiable with one of America's friendliest allies historically, Denmark. Remember, they were the country that, immediately stepped up at 9/11, sent troops to Afghanistan, had a lot more casualties per capita than the Americans did there. But that doesn't matter. The Americans aren't trying to negotiate with Denmark. The Americans are saying they want sovereignty over Greenland, and they will work directly with Greenland, both overtly and covertly. And they'll use both carrot and stick. And so, look, if there were a military invasion, yes, it would be the end of NATO. Just like if the Russians were to send tanks into Poland, it would actually lead to a war between NATO and Russia. But of course, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the United States deploying a whole bunch of tools, overt and covert, that are much less than sending troops into Greenland, and therefore makes it much harder for the Europeans to effectively respond. In a sense, it's the United States borrowing from the Russian playbook.
But, so what is the right way for Europe to respond? Is it drawing a red line? Does NATO actually actively intervene? How should...
Hey, putting it in your face, ladies and gentlemen, I keep telling y'all, we at the close of the age. We in that time. This is endgame, literally. So we're going to get back to the rest of the transmission. All right. And then you got this. They putting it in your face, ladies and gentlemen. Elon Musk says politicians are just the actors on the stage. You don't see the script writers, directors, and producers who control them, right? They are being controlled by archonic forces. Like me and Rob was talking about it. Joe Biden, that's who's playing Joe Biden right now, that's Jim Carrey. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of things that a lot of people are not ready for as we transition through this Great Awakening period. They're not ready for certain information because they have an emotional connection to these celebrities and politicians. They don't want to hear that. They don't understand that the whole cultivation process of democracy is nothing but cosplay. It's fraud. So like I said, you got new neutrinos coming in. These neutrinos is basically dismantling everything in a three-dimensional state, and it's manipulating the net of Indria, which is also known as the Draconian reptilian net, that's interconnected to the firmament in the electrical grid system. So the more these neutrinos come in, the more you're going to speak truth to power, which basically glitches the system. Now, I spoke about this the other night. I hope you guys seen the movie Night Patrol. Everybody put the rice bowls in the chat if you've seen the movie Night Patrol. Everybody put the rice bowls. Because this movie, it basically shows you the process of how the crash unit was basically created in the 80s and the 90s. And the crash unit is the Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums. So the crash unit, they was used as a mechanism to infiltrate the Crips and the Bloods. So in the movie, they were showing you how the Bloods were basically the personification of the Kanai tribe, which is connected to the Blackfoot Confederacy. And the Zulus were the personification of the Crips, because when you break down the etymology of the word Zulu, it means sky people, the people who come from the heavens who have the green light. So the guy who had the shaft and he had the green ring on his finger, these shapeshifters, they weren't able to touch him because he had the energy, he had the Christ energy. The Christ energy in itself is a protectorate. And that kind of makes me wonder why, the crash unit, they was going after Nipsey so hard. The police in LA, they hated Nipsey. They hated Nipsey for no reason. So like I said, there's a lot of truth in it because there's a reptilian catacombs underneath LA. It tells you right here. The reptilian catacombs referred to the famous 1930s legend in Los Angeles about a vast network of tunnels built by an advanced ancient race of lizard people, polarized by geophysical engineer G. Warren Schofet, who claimed to have mapped out the underground downtown LA using radio X-ray device, leading evacuations at Fort Moore Hill for gold tablets, though nothing sustainable was basically found. And then you had Credo Mutwa. Credo Mutwa, who was the highest priest on the land, he also talked about the reality of draconian reptilians, right? And how they brought the moon into the solar system, right? Because the moon, there wasn't a such thing as a moon in the inception of time, because it was basically only a sun cycle. Because like I said, the moon is what messed up the human circulatory system. So everybody need to watch this movie. Everybody need to watch this movie because it's talking about the unification process of the Crips and the Bloods, and how the Crips and the Bloods of today are basically incarnations of, the ancient tribes of the Blackfoot and the Zulus and things of that nature. They're telling your story in the form of entertainment. They're telling your story in a form of entertainment, but it's up to you to have that mental and spiritual fortitude to see what's really going on. So everybody need to watch this movie, Night Patrol, right? And then, oh yeah, I got another video for you guys. Because, this is also coinciding with the declassification process of the CIA documentations, that's basically talking about, unaliving.
To my esteemed
That's basically
colleague,
talking about unaliving the great majority of the people who was basically unalived by the CIA and the crash unit and all this other stuff. So I'm gonna show you this video that basically extrapolates that evidence, and then after that, we're gonna get into some Q&A at the end.
to my esteemed colleague and chairman of the new task force, Congresswoman Luna, for her remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Comer. When our founding fathers stood against tyranny, they did not merely oppose taxes. They defended the sacred idea of individual sovereignty. They declared that no government, agency, or title could infringe upon the freedoms of speech, religion, thought, and the pursuit of truth. For too long, the American spirit has been dimmed by a veil of secrecy, by a government that has grown too comfortable in the shadows, denying us the transparency we deserve. But today, we stand at the dawn of a new era, where the light of truth begins to shine through. A few weeks ago, President Donald Trump made a historic announcement. With the stroke of a pen, he committed to declassifying the files concerning the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a decision not just monumental, but pivotal. It is with profound honor that I have been entrusted by Speaker Mike Johnson and Chairman James Comer to lead the House Oversight Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets. Together with the help of the White House, our intelligence allies, the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, we will be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files. This task force will be a beacon of bipartisanship. On the Republican side, Representatives Burchett, Boebert, Burleson, Crane, Gill, and Mace will be joining me, although I'd like to note that I'm expanding this to the entire governing body and will be allowing certain members to waive on. Our first hearing is set for March. The date will be announced soon, and we've already initiated close to a dozen communications with various agencies, to include Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice and the Secretary of State. This will no longer be a task force that makes bold promises only to fade into irrelevance or send strongly worded letters. This will be a relentless pursuit of truth and transparency, and we will not stop until the American people have the answers they deserve. We will cut through the bureaucracy, challenge the stonewalling, and ensure that the American people finally get the truth.
See, we at the close of the age, so they got to give you the truth like I've been talking about. They got to give you the truth because we're at the close of the age. They got to give you the truth. So, okay. So also, I talk about a lot of this stuff inside my book. So the link to the book is in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. And now we're going to get to some Q&A. We're going to get to some Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to get to that. So put some questions, put the questions, everything that you want to ask me or whatever. We're going to get some Q&A going. Put the rice bowls in the chat. Okay. Salute to Charles. Salute to you, brother. And salute to A1 Clarity 11. And salute to Celestial Hill 4646. Salute to everybody in the chat. So I don't know why this is not updating all the questions. But for those who don't who haven't seen the movie, you can find the movie. It's in theaters right now. You're not able to stream it unless you got some type of, you know, jailbroken app or whatever. But the movie, you can find it in theaters. You can go watch it. The movie Night Patrol. So put some questions in the chat. It's not updating as fast as I thought it would be. So as we, you know, transition, you know, to the apex of the Great Awakening period, you have to be in alignment. You can't be forcing nothing. You can't chase nothing. Because when you understand the dynamic of a lion in itself doesn't chase its prey. It's the prey that walks in the path of the lion, then he attacks. That's what your energy should be like during this time period. You got to stop forcing. You got to stop forcing everything. You know what I'm saying? You got to stop drinking, the smoking, all this stuff. Because like I said, synthetic energy cannot cohabitate with fifth dimensional energy. Like I said, you're going through the process of a new heaven and a new earth because we're no longer under the Pleiadian light lock that was cultivated by the Van Allen belt. We're breaking out of the fixed position reality in real time because now we're going back into the Setya cycle, which is the golden age, the real golden age. But they want to give you the illusion of progressiveness with cybernetic sorcery, digital ID systems. They want to give you that, you know, concept, but it's not real. I don't know why it's not showing all of my questions up here. I guess I got to go from my phone and do it because it's not updating. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to get some questions from my phone. But put your questions in the chat. Put your questions in the chat until this updates because I don't know if this is a new yeah, here they go. Here they update now. All right. Yes, the weed is very much GMO because like I said, the weed in itself has a lot of aromatase levels, and the aromatase eradicates the testosterone level to where it transmutes into a form of estrogen. So it's basically puts you in a chronic imbalance. So like I said, step away from the weed. You got to go back into balance. You got to return to baseline because the planet is returning in baseline. Okay. Are loopers the test tube babies? A looper is a person, is a motherfucker that go through the same shit over and over and hoping, you know, to get, you know, get progress from it. You know, that's basically insanity. So it's kind of like the same people. NPCs, they're basically mentally, physically, and spiritually programmed to be subjugated by the system because they're stuck in the orbit of dysfunction. You ever seen a woman or a man, they date the same people in different bodies? Those are loopers. Those are NPCs because they're looking for a different outcome when really there's no outcome. You have to break away from the cycle. But they don't have the ability to break away from the cycle because they are programmed to go through the process of degradation, the emotional energy. Because like I said, the same shit that makes you happy is eventually going to make you sad. So you got to find the medium. You got to find the medium ground. You got to follow the path of the middle way. You cannot pick a side. When you start to pick sides, that's when you get subjugated by the illusion. Loopers always picking sides when you should be choosing your motherfucking self. Because you are the Christ that the Bible speaks about. Okay. I don't really get into like salute to you, Smizzard Lizard. Salute to you, but I haven't really tapped into that energy yet because I'm just kind of looking at things right now. So but from my guy, what I'm saying, from the people who do, that's, able to edify me on that information, I say XRP. XRP is the way to go, according to my resources and my sources. Salute to Alana D. Salute to you. Appreciate you. Okay. Oh, salute to Charles. I appreciate you, brother. And I definitely remember you. I remember. I got photographic memory. Let me see. We're going to get into some more questions. Okay, my question is, how are we going to maintain our health and safety if you don't make the material things we need to do that priority? Like I said, everybody got their lane. When it comes to health and wealth and stuff like that, and resources or whatever, Dr. Yaki, he's giving you the intrinsic information on how to revitalize your body to where you ain't got to go to the motherfucking hospital and you ain't got to go through the aisles of CVS to, basically edify your physiology. You ain't got to do that. You can go see Dr. Yaki for that. He's giving out free information on his YouTube. He's giving out, classes and things of that nature. So nobody has an excuse right now. The information is out there, right? But that's not my lane of expertise when it comes to giving people information about how to revitalize their health. Maybe one day, but it's not the time for me right now. Let me see. Getting into some more questions. And also hit up my brother, KT the Arch Degree. And he's also holding a seminar in Atlanta. I'm going to be down in Atlanta this weekend. And he's giving you, a full dietary system of his cookbook and on how to, he's preparing meals that basically helps your physiology. So he's got that going on in Atlanta this weekend on Saturday. I'm going to get into some more questions. It says, what's up with the Panther beef? It's so much divide and distractions. Yeah. I don't really, I'm saying, I'm kind of looking at this whole situation sideways myself because it kind of reminds me of the whole blueprint of what took place with Black Lives Matter. I'm getting that same energy from this, this Black Panther and the ICE thing. So that's why I said, as we transition in between from March to April, there's going to be a lot of sacrifices, right? Stay away from large crowds and people out there protesting because they looking for a way to siphon the energy. That's what the Rams basically, the LA Rams basically is a part of that whole dynamic because the Ram in itself is a form of sacrifice. So there's going to be a lot of sacrificial energy on the planet, whether it's happening to so-called Black people or if it's happening to celebrities, right? They're trying to find a way to siphon the energy. That's why I said you got to keep your energy up. You got to keep your energy high. Okay. So what do you plan to do when they require the digital ID in March? Shit, divorce from it. If you didn't get the damn draconian juice, I wouldn't subscribe to that as well. And the reason I say that is because you got to watch the movie Demolition Man, because the people who wasn't conforming to the system, they was basically exiled from society and they had to go underground. That's the same thing that basically the prophet Rod Hayes was talking about, right? Remember, he was talking about how the Anunnaki people, and they gave the people on the surface on the planet the edification on how to go inside the caverns of the earth, right? The same thing takes place because the digital ID system is connected to the synthetic grid system. They trying to steal your thoughts. As I was telling you guys before, they want to steal your thoughts because they trying to upload your thoughts into a neuromorphic cyber cloud. because artificial intelligence doesn't have the ability to think for itself. So it has to mimic the energy of the chosen ones who have authentic thoughts, those who have the Christ energy, those who have the green Ethereum energy, right? That's what this is all about. They're trying to create an artificial intelligence god, because artificial intelligence doesn't have emotional intelligence. It just has intelligence. It's only mimicking the energy that you put out. And also, when you understand artificial intelligence doesn't follow a program. So that's why I said you cannot confine yourself to a certain ideology. You can't confine yourself, or I'm Muslim, or I'm Christian, because artificial intelligence doesn't do that. Because artificial intelligence, I guess you could say, is pseudo, but you know, in reality, pseudo information in itself is actually the real truth, because that means that you're able to understand the science of circumology. You understand all perspectives to get one truth. That's what artificial intelligence does. You cannot get the truth just by connecting yourself to religion. You cannot only get the truth just by connecting yourself to any form of theological context. You got to study everything, right? So that's why I said artificial intelligence is being used as a mechanism to siphon the energy of the chosen ones, those who have authentic thoughts. That's why I keep telling people, think for yourself while it's still legal to. Think for yourself while it's still legal to. Because sooner or later, so in the near future, by 2030, it's going to be illegal for you to think for yourself. It's going to be illegal. And I also talk about that in my book as well. And also, speaking of my book, I was going to give out this information a long time ago, but my book is also being considered to be, somebody wants to turn it into a Netflix series. They want to turn my book, The Sacred Book of the Chosen, into a Netflix series. So that's also on the table. And I'm also putting together a science fiction book that's based on eugenics and the eugenics system, and how they're basically trying to extract the DNA of so-called Black women, because the Black women, they have the mitochondrial DNA in order to connect themselves to the magnetosphere. And I'm gonna show you the cover of it, you know, sometime in the middle of the year, because I already got all the information and everything that I need for it. But I'm gonna get you guys together. I don't want to say too much, so I had to put that out. We'll get to some more questions. And don't be like, I watch Brother Rich, salute to Brother Rich. I watched his live earlier. So like I said, just because you see people doing different things doesn't mean that they're a so-called sellout. I'll be the last motherfucker to sell out for anybody. Because like I said, don't nobody control me. I control myself. Salute to Light Senju. Salute to Beto. They releasing 28 days later a movie series, and Resident Evil 9 comes out next month. Yeah, actually, that's what Neuralink is all about. Because when you have Neuralink, the reason why they have Neuralink is because they don't have enough neuromelanin to create the energy that's connected to the olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve is on the right hemisphere of the brain, which is basically the personification of the Christ energy. So what happens is, when you have these nanoparticles and these digital ID systems all out, you know, in your neurological faculties, and you put Neuralink, what's going to happen is that these neutrinos that's coming in is basically going to dematerialize the two frontal lobes of the brain. It's going to dematerialize the two frontal lobes of the brain. It's going to put you in a state of zombification, because the two frontal lobes of the brain is what creates, is connected to your motor skills, right? So that's why I said artificial intelligence or any type of technology is what locks down your DNA. It locks down your DNA. So that's why I said they want to use psychotronic microscopic nanotechnology in order to siphon your energy and siphon your thoughts. They want to siphon your brain waves. They want to become God by extracting your thoughts. Because your thoughts is thoughts. Let me see. Okay. Well, the chat moving pretty quick. I'm trying to get to some questions. Um, now it's kind of like I already spoke about this. I already extrapolated this information. Um, when it comes to the Epstein files, now they're actually going to put the Epstein files inside the Grand Theft Auto video game. That's why they've been pushing it back so much. Because if you look at the last Grand Theft Auto, they show you the reality of the deep state. They was mocking the deep state because when you look at the Statue of Liberty in the last, I forgot what Grand Theft Auto it was. In one of the Grand Theft Autos, it shows Hillary Clinton as being the lady on the Statue of Liberty. They're mocking the deep state. So in this next one, they also have an island because I think it's based out of Miami, and they have an island in the game to where it's a mission to where it's able to lead you to the so-called Epstein files. It's kind of like the same thing Ready Player One, because in order to beat the game, you got to go inside the game and beat it in real time. It's the same concept. But they got to release those files eventually. Let me see. All right, let me go to some more. Salute to Divinity Warrior. Will you be open to doing a live on how to separate yourself from the existing systems of control? Yeah, and I also talk about that in my book also. So I'm eventually going to put out, a demonstration on that eventually. But first, what I'm saying, like, we got to make things make sense. It's because, like I said, we're at the close of the age, because a lot of people, they're not able to comprehend symbolism. So I want to give people the edification for that, and then we step into that. So eventually I'm going to get on that. So there's a lot of stuff that I haven't talked about. I'm going to be talking about it in the near future. No, you don't need status correction because you're at the close of the age. So what happens is you cannot fight paperwork with paperwork, because the paperwork in itself is connected to fraud. So that means that the paperwork in itself, it's kind of like multiplying any number by zero. That's what's going on right now. So there's no reason to correct your status, because when you sign over your nature, you sign over your signature, signing over your nature, you're still connecting yourself right back to the corporate system. So that's why I said you got to let Mother Nature do the work. Paperwork can't do the work. Only Mother Nature can. So there's no reason for using paper genocide to fight against them. And salute to Torture Hamilton. Salute to you, brother. And salute to Ham Mappington Edits. Even as a chosen one, do you feel that it's necessary to do the doom? Yeah, you got to get your resources in order. You gotta be prepared for everything, bro. You gotta have some gold. You gotta have some silver. You know what I'm saying? You gotta have some ammunition and things of that nature, because you want to be very much resourceful as we get to that transition period. You don't want to be out here naked. You know what I'm saying? So you definitely got to prep. You got to prep. Eventually, I'm gonna create a transmission on how to prepare yourself as you have the fall of the church and the fall of the economic system, and what to do when the grid goes down. I haven't seen this Lock and Key, but I'm gonna have to check it out, because like I said, I'm very much into movies, and most of the script that's being played in real time is connected to the movies. So I'm definitely going to check that out. Get back to everybody else's questions. All right. Okay. I'm gonna get into like maybe 3 more questions, and I'm gonna have to cut out because we almost at the hour 30 mark. Put the rice bowls in the chat, and salute to everybody who pulled up tonight. Said, do you mind reading the question I asked regarding to the movie? I didn't see it, but the movie Leave the World Behind is actually a documentary. It's actually a documentary of what's going to be taking place in the near future. Because Iran, right now, according to the World Economic Forum, you know, they're basically, they're basically a threat to the energetic grid system. Because, like I said, in the movie Leave the World Behind, the grid went down. Planes was falling out the sky, hit the man's backyard, and things of that nature. It was chaos going into the city. And then the prequel to the movie, or the sequel to the movie, was Civil War. So when you have the grid going down, that's when you're going to have the Civil War, because it's going to be a multitude of people on the planet fighting for resources, right? That's what's happening. Everything is a script. Everything is a script that's being played. I would say to move off the coastlines. Just move off the coastlines and go kind of so much in the Midwest area. Midwest area is a very, I guess you can say that's a safe zone. Midwest area. Just definitely move off the coastlines. Specifically California, New York City, Washington, D.C., and especially Washington, D.C. I don't know if they fixed it, but a long time ago, not too long ago, I mean, you was able to look up Washington, D.C., and the D.C. was gone because the new headquarters of the United States government is actually going to be in Denver, right? This is why they got Cheyenne Mountain. You know what I'm saying? This is why they got Dr. Malachi Z. York inside of a super prison in, I think it's in Denver, I believe. They got him locked up in a maximum prison in Colorado somewhere. And those tunnels, and that tunnel system in itself is connected to Cheyenne Mountain. We go good. One more question. And like I said, I'm gonna be in Atlanta this weekend on Saturday. I'm gonna be in Atlanta this weekend on Saturday, and I'm gonna be pulling up to KT the Arch Degrees event. So for those of you who live in Atlanta, live in that geographical area, pull up. Okay. The monks walking was basically a sign of judgment. It's a sign of judgment because, like I said, remember from the 2017, 2023, 2024 solar eclipse that created an ancient owl symbol over the geographical landmass of America. And the reason that is because, like I said, we're going through a transitional period. So the ancient owl symbol is basically one of those things where the solar eclipse went through 7 cities called Salem and 9 cities called Nineveh. So when you look into Jonah chapter 3, verse 5, it says Nineveh shall be overthrown, because Nineveh is a nomenclature appellation title that's connected to America, because Nineveh was connected to the Assyrian Empire that was controlled by Babylon. And America in real time is modern day Babylon, right? So the monks walking is basically a severe warning talking about the collapse of the corporate system that was controlled by, the oligarchs and the plutocracy. Let's see. Let me get one more question in, and we got to end the transmission. And I got an interview that's gonna be I'm gonna be uploading here sometime next week, and I'm gonna be doing one of those at least once a month. So I'm gonna be doing some different things on the channel. So be prepared for that. One more question. Salute to my guy Moski, DJ Mo. Salute to my brother. Top 5 DJ in the nation. All right, let me go. I don't really see no questions. Give me at least one more before I cut out. Is there hope for those who are homeless, jobless, or careless? Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm actually going to be doing a program. I reached out to some homeless shelters, and I was one to give out free books and free food. Because, like I said, you can't just feed the body in itself. You also got to feed the mind. And the homeless shelters, they turned me down. They said my book was too radical. So, so what I'm going to do is, when it gets hot outside a little bit, when the weather kind of breaks, I'm gonna set up a lot of flyers, and I'm gonna there's a parking lot in this park or whatever that's close to my crib or whatever, and I'm gonna set up. I'm gonna be handing out free food and books to the homeless people because there's a gas station by there, and there's a lot of homeless people up there, and people walk by them people like they don't give a fuck about them people at all. So I'm just gonna extend my hand for that. So there is hope for, if you have a heart, you know what I'm saying? There is hope for people who are jobless or homeless, you know what I'm saying? So you just gotta extend your hand. You gotta extend your hand and help people. Because like I said, because when you reach a certain level of intelligence, you see yourself in everybody. If I was down on my luck, I would want somebody to give me $50, give me $60. Because I would, you know what I'm saying? That's what I do, when I see somebody down on their luck. So it's kind of like it's an energy exchange. Those who took that the draconian juice, like I said, it's one of those things where your physiology is going to decline eventually because, like I said, the neutrinos is coming in because the neutrinos is supposed to resurrect the body. But the so-called draconian juice that they put in your arm or whatever, those who took it, that's a whole bunch of nanotechnology all throughout your body. Because technology locks down DNA, and we're going through the great purification period, which is basically the unraveling process. So when you have the unraveling of DNA, a lot of people are not going to be able to reap the benefits of it because they have technology being locked down to their physiology. It's another way to keep you connected to the synthetic grid system. They want to trap your soul and your spirit. That way it can be tether connected to the energetic grid system. They want to keep you stuck here. That is another way. So the draconian juice in itself is basically kind of like a floppy disk or a USB drive. They're trying to save your essence in the form of technology. So like I said, if you got that, draconian juice in you, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a synaptic firewall. It's like a firewall. You're going to be blocked from being able to enhance your DNA. So that's when in the enhancing of the DNA in itself is basically the activation of the X gene, which makes you an X-man. Because when you activate the X gene, you connect yourself to the magnetosphere, where you become Magneto, non-science technology, where you're able to reap the benefits of your spiritual gifts that's connected to the Bathari gland in the hippocampus layer of the brain. So that's where you get your spiritual gifts and ESP, extrasensory perception. All that stuff comes from the olfactory nerve that gives the etheric combustion to the hippocampus layer of the brain. That's when you get into psychometry, clairvoyance, intuition. Let's see. I said I was gonna I'm gonna do one more question. Yeah, salute to Dr. Phil. I actually just talked to him a few days ago, actually. Dr. Phil Valentine, salute to Baba. Okay. Now, my process on shape-shifting, a lot of people got to understand the dynamics of shape-shifting. Shape-shifting is operated by way of liquid crystal polarization, which is liquid crystal technology. So it operates on the melanocortin-1 receptor gene. So when you, like for instance, like a video game, the PS5, if you got a PS5, the PS5 is what processes the image, but the image is uploaded on the screen, which is a holographic projection. So the same thing takes place when you're looking at Draconian reptilians or a shapeshifter or a skinwalker, because it placates on your emotions, and your emotions is basically controlled by only what you think you want to see. So that's why I said it's a processing system. So that's how shape-shifting works. It's the same gene that, you know, chameleons have. It's called the melanocortin-1 receptor gene. So like I said, shape-shifting, it operates on liquid crystal technology. So that's why when you see stuff on the TV screen and they get the glitching and you see the eyes changing, that's because the glitching in itself is an interface transition. And that interface transition is what's basically manipulating the liquid crystal technology that is being projected on the screen. So that's why I said, so it operates, it's like a chromatophore. A chromatophore is what processes the image, and the image is projected on the screen, which is basically the illusion. That's how shape-shifting works. But yeah, salute to everybody in the chat. I gotta get my son in the tub. He got to go to school tomorrow. So salute to everybody, you know, working on themselves. So like I said, do not chase nothing during this time period. Because like I said, a lion doesn't chase his prey. It's the prey that walks in the path of the lion. So you got to be in alignment in order to reap the benefits of the resources that the universe has basically laid out for you. So you have to be in alignment. You can't force shit in the fifth dimension. Everything comes to you when you open your heart up, because the heart in itself is highly magnetic. That's why I keep telling people, study neurocardiology, right? So if your heart is open, everything is going to come to you in full circle. You don't have to chase nothing. You ain't got to chase relationships. You ain't got to chase money. You ain't got to chase materialism. Everything is going to work in conjunction because you're in alignment. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, end of transmission.
I know it's been a long since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you, and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day when I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling, when it's wrong you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. This a completion, the selfish Proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. You try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille, and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God, I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.